B68 isn't just the postcode for Oldbury, but a team in the top flight of the Faroese pyramid, which you probably expect from this channel now. Despite finishing 4th in the 2nd tier last season, the Faroe Islands promotion rules surrounding reserve teams meant that this team were eligible for a promotion playoff and beat top tier side Argia to gain promotion back to the top flight for the first time in 5 years. A former national stadium, an island games host and a football crazy community, this is Faroe Ball and this is B68 Toftir. B68 stands for Bóltfelag 68, or 68 Football Club, and were formed in 1962. Not 68, as the name might suggest, but they started as a sports team and added football to their roster in 1968. Toftir is a small village next door to Runavík, and is one of the smallest places in the Faroe Islands to have a football team. They get to play their near neighbours NSOI in the league for the first time in 5 years this season, which should make for some tasty peninsular derbies. Their ground, Svangaskarð, arguably contains more sporting history than any other Faroese ground, despite only opening in 1980. When it opened, it was just a gravel pitch, and it wasn't until 1984, the year B68 won the league, when they put in proper changing rooms to replace the small changing huts. A few years later, artificial grass was laid down, and in 1989 they added a running track so that they could host the Island Games, which is basically the Olympics for nations and islands that aren't quite nations. In the 1989 games, for example, Guernsey won 3 golds in archery, the Isle of Man won 6 cycling golds, and Åland and the Isle of Wight picked up golds in gymnastics. The following year, the Faroe Islands gained membership of UEFA, which made them eligible to qualify for Euro 1992, but as they had no suitable grounds, their qualifying matches were played in Sweden. The football-loving people of Toftir were determined to change that, and by the end of 1991 they'd laid a grass pitch, replaced and refurbished the stands at the ground, and brought the whole stadium up to UEFA standards, and on 20th of October 1991 the Faroe Islands played their first official game as a UEFA member in front of a home crowd. When the national stadium, the Tórsvalla, was opened in 1999, the national team rotated between that and the Svangaskarð Stadium until the final game in Toftir, a 2-0 win over Estonia on the 7th of June 2011. For the stadium, the finest hour was packing almost 7,000 fans in to see Faroe Islands beat Malta 2-1 in 1998, which is a sizable chunk of the population of the whole country. But for B68, their glory days were in the mid-80s, where they won the league for the first time in 1984 and immediately followed it up by winning the league a second time in 1985. After a few seasons milling around the top half of the table, they'd win the league again in 1992 and qualify for the Champions League preliminary round. They got quite a tie too, being drawn against Dinamo Zagreb, but got spanked 11-0 on aggregate to end their European adventure. They have been in Europe more recently though. They made the 2004-2005 UEFA Cup after a 3rd place finish in the league, where they were drawn against Latvian side Ventspils and lost on aggregate 11-0 again. The team were relegated from the top flight that season too, and have been yo-yoing between the top and 2nd tier ever since. One of the brightest sparks in the current B68 crop is 22-year-old Andri Benjaminsen. He scored 21 goals in the 2nd tier last season and was the driving force behind their promotion to the top flight, and you'd expect him to grab a few goals this season too. Also at the club is Łukasz Szczęśliewicz, who I wrongly said was at Wojcinga in an earlier video, but in the close season he moved to B68. And when you're looking to stay in the league, what better head to have in your team than the twice winner of Faroese Player of the Year? Their manager is Páll Guðlaugsson. Hold on, that name sounds familiar. Yes, it's the same man who took Faroe Islands to that famous win against Austria in 1990. The Faroese national team was actually his first managerial job, and since then he's managed ÖF, EB Strømmer, B36, GOI Gøta, Icelandic side Keflavik, Klagsvík, TB, and now B68. So he's been around the top flight plenty of times. Probably the most famous face in the Faroe Islands national team is Jóan Edmundsson, who played last season in the German Bundesliga with Arminia Bielefeld. Born in Toftir, Edmundsson started his career with B68, notching up 10 goals in 49 games while still a teenager. This got him a move to the then championship side Newcastle United, but he failed to make a single appearance, and after returning to the Faroes, he transferred to Vejle in Denmark and then Odense, and then got his move to Germany. He's got 61 caps for the Faroe Islands, and scored one of the most celebrated goals, the one that gave the team a 1-0 win away in Greece in Euro 2016 qualifying. At the time, there was a 169 place difference in rankings between the countries, making it statistically the biggest international upset ever. With B68 finishing almost mid-table in the second tier last season and then coming up through the playoff, it will be a struggle for them to stay there. I've got them finishing bottom, but I'm more than happy for them to prove me wrong. And that's the full table and how it definitely won't look, because I'm useless at predicting things. We've been through all the Premier League teams, but we're not stopping yet. Come back soon for a deep dive into the second tier with last year's relegation playoff losers, Argia.